Welcome grade 6 students to the science class. Today we're going to start with the first lesson in the second week of this year. Our objectives are super easy and interesting too. In this session we will be studying about what do scientists do in the first chapter of the book. I know that some of you they didn't receive the book yet, but you will receive it once it's available in the bookstore. Make sure that you're having with you your science notebook and the necessary stationery for this session. We will discuss today two objectives about formulating a scientific hypothesis with guided practice and self assessment questions. So, by the end of this session, you will be able to formulate a good scientific hypothesis, and we will learn how to distinguish between a good hypothesis and a bad hypothesis. Guys, just let me check first if you still remember what did we explain in the previous sessions. So let's consider this scientific statement. The height of bean plants depends on the amount of water they receive. What we have to do for this statement is that we will identify the variables there. We have to identify the independent variable, the dependent variable, and the controlled variable. So please pause this video for 1 minute, try to find the answers, and then we will check the answers together. Well, what the scientist in the above statement was doing is that he was changing the amount of water, and he was each and every time measuring or observing the height of bean plants. So, what was the scientist changing? We'll name it the independent variable, which was the amount of water. And what was the scientist measuring or observing is the dependent variable, which was, according to the given statement, the height of bean plant. While what was constant or the same during the whole given experiment, or what do we call the controlled variables, are the type of bean plants, because we were using the same type of bean plants, the amount of sunlight provided, the type of soil, the amount of soil, and also we can add the kind of water added. Once we identified some suitably focused questions, we can then begin to figure out how to find their answers. So, what is a hypothesis exactly? A hypothesis is a predicted answer for a given question. So, the scientific hypothesis specifically doesn't have to be correct ones. Why? Because it's just a prediction. So I'm predicting a given answer for a given question. So it's not necessary for my answer to be a correct ones, but it must be a testable one. So when I do write a given scientific hypothesis, my hypothesis should be testable. I should be able to test whether my hypothesis is correct or not, but it's not necessary that my hypothesis is a correct one. Now, how to write a hypothesis or how to formulate a hypothesis? Formulating hypothesis will be very easy because we're going to use this general form. This general form will start with if, and after the if clause you're going to use the word then. Now the if clause will indicate the change in the dependent variable, and then you will indicate the predicted change in the dependent variable. So let's see this example that is shown on this slide. If I increase the amount of water, in this case the amount of water is the independent variable, and how I was changing the independent variable, I was increasing the amount of water. Then what I'm predicting will happen to the height of the bean plant, then the height of the bean plant will increase. So the height of the bean plant is the dependent variable, and I'm predicting that the height of the bean plant will increase. So as a summary, the hypothesis should start by an if clause that indicates the change in the independent variable, followed by then that will indicate the predicted change in the dependent variable. So as a summary, how to formulate a hypothesis? You have first to start by your own observations to find an inquiry question. You have to define the variables and then you have to predict a possible answer by writing a given hypothesis. Finally, we will start practicing together writing a hypothesis. So we're going to use this experiment shown in the slide as an example. 50 ml of water was added for both plants in the morning every day for 1 week. But the plant A was actually receiving fertilizers, however, plant B was not receiving fertilizers. What we have to do is that we have to observe the figure carefully and we have to write down an inquiry question related to what you are observing in the figure. So please pause again this video for 1 minute and try to write your own inquiry questions related to your observations. So, if you observe this figure carefully, you will notice that there exists a huge difference between the growth rate of the growth rate of plant A and the growth rate of plant B. What is the reasonable question in this case? Okay, one of the reasonable inquiry questions in this case is, why did plant A grow faster than plant B? So, we started in the previous slide by writing the inquiry question about why plant A grew faster than plant B. So this was the first step of writing the hypothesis, which is writing the inquiry question. Now we have to start identifying the variables. So first we will identify the independent variable, or what we will be changing in the experiment. So as you noticed here, we were either adding fertilizers or not. So the independent variable is the fertilizer, whether it was added or not. Now, the dependent variable is what we were measuring or what we were observing. So actually, we were measuring the height of the plant, or we were observing or measuring the growth of the plants. Now, what about the variables that they were the same during the given experiment, and we call them the controlled variables? They were the kinds of the plant. We used the same kind of plant in this experiment, the amount of water added, the kind of soil, and the provided sunlight. Both plants were receiving the same sunlight. Guys, let's practice more together. We have a new case. The amount of pollution produced by cars was measured for cars using gasoline with or without lead. The first step that we have to do is that we have to identify the independent variable, the dependent variable, and the controlled variables. Then you have to formulate your own hypothesis. Don't forget that the hypothesis should start with if followed by then. Pause this video for 3 minutes and try to write your own hypothesis, and then we will correct our answers together. Let's check now whether your answers match with the correct answers or not. So, the amount of pollution produced by cars was measured for cars using gasoline with or without lead. What we were changing in this experiment was the presence or the absence of the lead in the gasoline. So the independent variable was the amount of lead in the gasoline. What we were measuring or what we were observing is the pollution. So this was the dependent variable. What was the same during the whole given experiment is the same car type was used and the same number of cars also was used. So how to write the given hypothesis? We'll start with the if. So if with the independent variable. So if with the independent variable. So if there is lead in the gasoline, then the dependent variable, which is the pollution, then pollution will increase. So again, if there is lead in the gasoline, this is related to the independent variable. Our prediction is related to the dependent variable will be then pollution will increase. So this is one of the hypotheses that we may write for the given case above. Let's practice more and more. So observe carefully the given case shown on the slide and try to identify the independent variable, the dependent variable, and the controlled variable. Also, pause your video just for 3 minutes and try to identify the given variable. After identifying the variables, try to write your own hypothesis using the general form that we learned about before. So, in this given experiment, if you observe carefully, we have two plants. One of them was exposed directly to the sunlight, and one of them was kept in a given opaque box, which means that this plant was deprived from the sunlight. After some days, we noticed that one of the plants was surviving normally, the one that was directly exposed to the sunlight, while the one that was deprived from the sunlight, it's not surviving anymore. So, what is the independent variable in this case, or what we were changing in this case? It's the availability of sunlight, because one of them was directly exposed to the sunlight while the other was not. What about the dependent variable? What we were measuring or what we were observing is the survival of the plant, whether the plant is going to survive or not. What were the controlled variables? We were using the same kind of plants, we were using the same amount of water, we were using the same kind of water, we were using the same kind of soil. They were both, for example, put on the same temperature. Now, what about writing our own prediction or our own hypothesis? So, we will start by if, showing the change in the independent variable. So, if the plant was deprived from sunlight, then showing the change in the dependent variable, then it will not survive. So, this was my own prediction regarding my observations for this given experiments and for the given results. So, if the plant was deprived from sunlight, then it will not survive. Now, try to assess yourself whether you are able to write your own hypothesis. So, please, on your copybooks, write the given case. So, does the TV watching time seem to affect the reading scores of the fourth graders? Identify in this case the independent variable, the dependent variable, the controlled variable, and then write the given hypothesis on the copybook. Keep in your mind, a hypothesis is a prediction. So it's not necessary for your hypothesis to be a correct one. It's a prediction. So make your own predictions, but follow the given form that we learned about before. This is the second case that you will use to identify the independent variable, the dependent variable, the controlled variables. So does the wing length affect the distance a plane flies? And when you finish from identifying the variables, just write the given hypothesis and then join the Zoom session and we will discuss your answers there.